Max Gorlin, Melbourne Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
This is Nat Fyfe from the Fremantle Footy Club.
Trent Cotchin from the Richmond Footy Club.
Scott Pendlebury from the Collingwood Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Patrick Cooch from the Carlton Footy Club.
It's Rory Sloane here from the Adelaide Crows.
This is Tom Mitchell from the Hawthorn Footy Club, and you're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Hey friends, it's MJ from the Coaches Panel. I hope you're enjoying your week. If you're living in Victoria or certain parts of it, welcome back to full-on ISO life. Certainly that's what Kane and I find ourselves doing, and it's great to have Kane back on the episode, man. How are you, buddy?
I'm well, thank you, MJ. Massive week of fantasy as always. There's always something new happening in this season, whether it's on field, off field, and everyone's just trying to get by and work it out as we go.
It's true. Well, look, you talk about last weekend and the fantasy footy. Well, it was a difficult week for a lot of people. You might have been a Matt Rowell owner. In fact, pretty much every Coaches Panel listener owned Matt Rowell. Bailey Smith owners copping themselves a 1 in AFL Fantasy and DreamTeam. Then you throw in some additional poor, underperforming scores, a couple of tags, and all of a sudden, guys just had a really rough week. And I think it all got capped off with the early injury to a Matt Rowell. It means for us, Kane, he does need to get moved on. The Gold Coast Suns have decided they're going to go in for that surgery. And look, let's be honest, fair enough too, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think that's the thing. When you look at the type of player he is, we know he played 4 full games, already had 30 coaches' votes from round 2 to 4. Like we're talking about a level that had him in Brownlow contention. And I think for the Suns, they know they've got an absolute elite player on their hands. There's no point risking his future, especially in a compromised season where so many things are going every direction. And obviously the premiership's just as important as ever. But when you look at the longevity of what the Suns have ahead of them and what Matt Rowell does, very smart decision just to get it taken care of, get him back to 100%. And no point taking a risk with a guy of that quality.
Absolutely not. It does mean for all of us as fantasy coaches here, there's an absolute must trade out this week. You've got so much cash that he has made for you. Yes, he could have made more, but there is so much he's made in AFL Dream Team. He's netted you nearly $300,000. What an impressive effort there. Just over $250,000 in AFL Fantasy and just a touch over $260,000 in SuperCoach. He still has an attainable break even in AFL Fantasy, in fact, all formats. But again, we're talking about a guy that's missing the next 12 weeks. He is a trade. What are we doing here, Kane? Are we maximizing the money that he's made and looking for a premium to bring into our line, or are we double downing and going back to a cash cow and trying to increase the value and cash generation?
Well, MJ, firstly, you have to think that if you said at the start of the season, you could be sidewaysing or even getting some cash, downgrading Matt Rowell to another elite proven player, you'd be over the moon. Obviously, all of us, the way he was going, thought he'd be in our sides for the rest of the season. And that does hurt because there's a lot of coaches that have had a lot of injuries. There's a lot of coaches that have sideways players, obviously, especially in SuperCoach, where the points have gone a lot of different directions than we may have expected. So I think that's what's obviously a lot of coaches, like the majority of the competition, especially the ones that play this format as closely as we do, have Matt Rowell. So everyone's in the same boat. But I think in terms of building our sides, that's where it really hurts because now we're having to use a trade to bring another premium in. I think the important thing, MJ, this week is, as always, what are you doing with your other trade?
Yeah.
Because if you've got cash in the bank this week, there's players like a Brandon Starcevic. I know people think he has some money to make still, and I think he does too.
Yeah, there's a little bit more.
But the point of this game is to turn rookies into premium players and get points on field.
Yeah.
So if you've got enough cash in the bank to turn, let's just say, a Starcevic and a Rowell into 2 premium guys that you're very happy to have in your team for the rest of the year. Again, even mentioned a Lockie Whitfield. Let's just say you're getting some cash from Matthew Rowell in SuperCoach.
Yeah.
If you've got 100, 110, 120K in the bank already, you throw that 30K and you could turn a Starcevic into a Jordan Ridley.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden you're turning in, again, we know how good Matt Rowell was, but at the start of the season, 2 rookie players into 2 premium options. So if you've got cash in the bank, I think that's where that gets really attractive.
Yeah.
Otherwise, again, you've probably got a lot of options because you drop a rookie down 100K and put that on Matt Rowell. Even if you had nothing in the bank, you've got a lot of choices. And again, you can almost get to a Jake Lloyd and, lock away that top premium in the back line. Whitfield's a bargain. There's heaps of midfielders that are, great value. So I think, as we said last week, MJ, it's a great time to look at your rookies, especially if we think, a Marlon Pickett's going to come back into the team.
Yeah.
Maybe a Bennell gets recalled. Look where you're getting poor scores from the rookies, because last week, for instance, the forward rookies were sensational.
Yeah.
Sam Sturt, Max King, Curtis Taylor. In SuperCoach, they were all 70 plus, and Curtis Taylor dropped a ton.
Yeah.
Conversely, in the midfield, again, I know he's a forward as well, but, Buderick, 28, Tyler Brown, 29, Starcevic, 38. So I think it's a good opportunity to realign your side again, maximize those rookies, especially cover as well, because we just don't know what's happening with teams. Last week, we lost Brander. We lost Noble. We were hoping for a Bennell recall. We were hoping for a Pickett. So I think use that opportunity to just probably make your decision based on that other player that you can bring onto the field. Again, I don't think there's any point if Pickett comes back into the team that you could have him on the bench and be playing, a Buderick or a Brown. Like, you've really got to maximize that. So I think it's a great week for teams to take advantage of that, because Raul's just at a sweet spot where you have just a plethora of options.
You've got so many options. You talk about, guys that have got, barely any money. Lockie Whitfield in SuperCoach, it's pocketing you nearly that 30K. For less than 10K, you can turn it into Elliot Yohan. He really turned it around last weekend. I know he had a heap of clangers in the early part of the season, but in SuperCoach, if you are looking for a dirt cheap option that is capable of going 105 for the rest of the year, I've got no hesitation recommending Yo. And yes, Shuey's out for a couple of weeks, but let's be honest. With Kelly and Gaff in that side, Kelly's only like 12K more, by the way, in SuperCoach than Rao. There is no way you tag Elliot Yo over those two elite players. Menegola's showing he's in some nice form across all of the formats. Even Cornelio, while it's a little bit risky, these are just pure midfielders in like for like. While it's got a risky component, and again, with Tim Taranto sounding like he's coming back either this week or next into that GWS side, that reward, given the price point you're paying for him, what he can do is huge. And then if you want to flip him into some other lines, Bailey Smith in 2 weeks' time, if you don't own him, he's that perfect guy to forecast to go and get. You mentioned Jordan Ridley. I think more SuperCoach than the other formats, I'd be really jumping out of my skin to go and get him. But again, it's making you money in that trade. Toby Green and Brandon Parfitt, both are pretty much comparable sideways trades. Even a Harris Andrews in SuperCoach in the back line. These are just some of the names. I've done an article that you can check out at coachespanel.tv for guys I think that, for a pretty comparable price, you can move Rao to. If you've got a bit of cash, who you could be targeting across all the formats. But I think the beauty of what he's done now is he's also opened up some unique opportunities in our teams too, Kane, where we need to start looking at some differentials in our side. Yes, getting guys that are buy low price, but also getting guys that are going to set our team apart.
Yeah, I think that's the interesting thing. Yo in particular is one that you've got 2 seasons in SuperCoach of back-to-back 107. And I think the reason that Yo comes into it this year more than ever, MJ, is that of the top midfielders, if you're looking at just average, clearly Fife and Neal are scoring incredible. And year on year, they seem to be guys that are always in that conversation for the top 8. I think the reason Yo's starting to become interesting is that of the other guys in that top 10 currently, we don't have supreme confidence they'll continue this run of form. I love what Jack Steele's doing. Travis Boak, this year and one previous, he's just gone to a whole nother level.
Yeah.
But it's the likes of, McRae, Kelly, the guys that we've banked on year, Dangerfield.
Yeah.
They haven't really set the world on fire, and especially in SuperCoach where you factor in this shorter game and points have been distributed in different fashions. I think when you look at an Elliot Yo, obviously, as you mentioned, the price is sensational. It's barely, it's not even 10K to go Rowdy Yo.
Yeah.
The other thing that's tempting people, I believe, is that you're walking straight into a matchup with the Crows.
Yeah.
So I know people are talking about them going back to WA after this, which is obviously huge. Again, there's not much of a differential in terms of Yo at Optus Stadium, but obviously it has to be an advantage compared to the competition to be playing in your home state, especially for an extended period of time. And when you're walking into a matchup like the Crows, MJ, at the moment, the way they're traveling and the way their side is actually structured, I was looking at just the 22s that the Crows have put out. In the last 3 weeks, half of the 22 are less than 50 game players.
Yeah.
And we're talking about a West Coast team. You know, they've obviously lost their captain, Luke Shuey, but that engine room with Nick Natanui,
Yeah.
you know, we know Tim Kelly, we know Gaff, we know Yo, Sheed. They've got a great side.
It's not bad. Yeah.
And it's no surprise last week when Yo got going, the midfield obviously won the game with no Sydney Ruckman, and he scored great. At the round one game against Melbourne, he gave away 7 free kicks for that score of 57. If you've ever watched Elliot Yo play, you know that if that tackling decision is adjudicated slightly different, some of those free kicks against him become free kicks for and tackles.
Yeah.
And you've just got to, I think, back a guy that, you know, 107 in the past, we probably wouldn't have wanted in our final 8 because we see guys pushing up towards the 120.
Yeah.
But in this short season, when there's only 12 rounds remaining after this, and you're factoring in the value and knowing that I might be better off skimping, 100K on a Yo to a steal per se.
Yeah.
Because in a couple of weeks, that 80K, if I keep going for that slightly cheaper option and they can get close enough, all of a sudden, I've got enough cash to do a whole nother upgrade. And I think that's what people are worried about, especially like you mentioned, the value. Whitfield 440, Bailey Smith down at 400K. Like, you're talking about these guys, you might just have to pick them in the midfield because they're such good value.
Yeah.
And especially if the rookies keep hovering around this 30 to 50 range. Again, I think people are just inclined, let me just get good points on field. I'm not going to have to bother chasing like in the past. I need the 120 guys. As I said, in this shortened season and the variance is so high, we saw Marcus Bontempelli the week before, he was 160 and he had a massive impact on the game. The Bulldogs won on the weekend and were great, but it wasn't him driving that result.
No.
And all of a sudden, the score's in the 50s. So that's where Lachie Neale's benefiting so much, is that when the game's on the line, especially in the first quarter and the second quarter, he's going absolute great guns and he's setting it up for his team. And we haven't really seen that. Obviously, they lost round one, but that was a Hawthorn side that's very happy to give you the ball. So I'm very curious to see, part of this is predicting the team winning, but also that player needs to be the one driving it. And unfortunately for Bontempelli owners, it wasn't him. But on the flip side, that's why when he does drive it, these 160 scores become very attainable. And that's why I think with this volatility, people go, well, at least the safest thing I can do is get a guy like Yo and save the cash. Save the cash for a future day because, as I said before, I just don't have any confidence that outside of Neale and Fife in SuperCoach, who else will be in that top 8 group? So if I've got doubt over that, I'm always going to take the cheaper guy.
It's true. Well, if you look at who are the top 8 scoring midfielders right now, and maybe I know a few episodes ago you were talking about guys that started well last year and then had a poor score. We'll look at that too in terms of some learnings for us. But if we just focus on purely SuperCoach midfielders at the moment, the top 8 in terms of total points, Neale, Boak. We knew he was good last year, but number 2 midfielder in the comp right now for points, not so sure. Duncan, Simpkin, you could remove him out in terms of the forward eligibility if you like. Then some names that, again, you probably wouldn't have picked. Steele, Parker, Adams, Gaff, McCluggage, and Lyons. They are all outscoring Cripps and Tom Mitchell. Look, Scott Pendlebury's having a good year as well. Tuke Miller is up there in the top 20 total point scoring players through the formats in the midfield at the moment. So it's one of those interesting and fascinating years that just because you've started strong, you've flown out of the gate, you've got these big boys, doesn't mean they're not. And I think you're right. Yo is that perfect candidate. Is he going to be 120? No. But can he go on a run of a 4, 5, 6 weeks and get you that 115, 120 at a cheaper price and having the right matchups these next 2 weeks? I think he's a good one because you're right. Sometimes we look at what a player's done and go, well, that's what they're going to keep doing. But we keep looking, if we want to look back over previous years, just because you start on fire in one year, it's not the automatic guarantee you're going to do it for the rest of the year, is it? Yeah,
that's the thing, MJ. Like, you just don't want to be paying for past performances. Like, I look at an Elliot Yo and a Luke Parker. I totally think from now on, they could both score the same. And Luke Parker's 100K more. And that's why, as I mentioned, when you've got a guy like Yo, price is great.
Yeah.
Proven performer over multiple years.
Yeah.
I think in a great side, a side that's going to win a lot of games. And we've seen this year, as I mentioned, it's more important than ever that your team wins because of the scoring involvements you get. Again,
Yeah.
if you're not involved in scoring, very hard. And that's where a lot of these points come from. But
Yeah.
like you mentioned, MJ, a couple of weeks ago, I spoke about, who are the guys that last year jumped out of the gate and we all thought, okay, this is the year. And then they tailed away. Like I look back at Dream Team last year, after 5 rounds, Ricky Henderson had the 5th most points in the competition. He was going at 110.
Oh, yeah.
And again, we were all absolutely, enthralled by what he was doing. If you brought him in after round 5, he gave you an average of 92 in the remaining 17 games.
Yeah, wow.
On the flip side, we spoke about, you look at a Dane Zorko. Again, last 2 years, he'd been a slow start. It was going at 90 in the first 5. After that, MJ, he went at 108 in the final 17 games and was just outside the top 10. So these are the guys that you have to think it's going to balance back out. It's very rare you're going to get a Dane Zorko, especially someone like a Zorko who is prone to attack, but then on the flip side, has the ceiling to balance it back out. And Yo, in that sense, has a similar ability. He'll have games where, like I mentioned, round 1, he gave away 7 free kicks and scored in the 50s. But then conversely, he'll have a game where those tackles go his way. It's a free kick for contested possessions, and he's a 150. So if you think you've copped some of these bad scores, year after year, we see that it does balance back out. Again, Patrick Cripps was another one that I think coaches last year, he had the 3rd most points after 5 rounds, going at 119.
Yeah.
Again, everyone, well, I shouldn't say everyone, but most coaches were thinking, well, this is the year. I've got to get him in. I've got to find a way to get him in.
Yeah.
He played 15 of the next 17 games, went at an average of 95.
Yeah.
And you were paying, by that point, you were probably almost paying 110 plus. So that's where I caution people that if you're bringing in someone, that means you've missed what they've already delivered. So you have to be really confident that it's going to continue. And as I mentioned, when I look at that top 10 and the guys you read out in SuperCoach, I don't have any confidence that they're going to be clearly above a guy like Yo. And especially, I don't want to pay 100K more to do it. Again, there's guys like McRae, MJ, that we know year on year are the best guys. Like they just deliver year on year. And as I said, I know it's a different year, but I want more than 5 games to make that decision, to see what happens with them. Either they rocket back up and they show that they're a great scorer, or if they keep going slow, they'll only become a better option in the future. So I really get why the love in the community for a guy like Yo, because as I mentioned, he ticks so many boxes, and a year where cash is hard to find, I think it's a type of option that can really propel your season forward. And most importantly, get these rookies off the field that are giving us, sub 40 scores, and get someone that, maybe 100 is enough at that price for the next 17 weeks. But like I said, we know he can go 110 for extended stretches also.
Yeah. I think there's some fascinating ways coaches are going to go about generating cash in their teams this year. In Dream Team, look, honestly, unless you nailed the picks of Simpkin and Smith in your starting lineups, maybe you jumped on a Ridley.
A Ridley, maybe, MJ.
In the back line, or even, you went the uniques through the midfield that have fired for us a little bit, like the Taylor Adams and the Luke Parkers that seemed value, even a Lockie Neal. Like, if you haven't nailed those mid-price or underpriced premiums in Dream Team, I'm not seeing a lot of coaches completing their side unless they're having to factor in guys like Brayshaw and Houston as a part of completed teams. And to be fair, maybe they're going to be close enough to be completed teams anyway.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, MJ. There's going to be players, like you mentioned, a Houston and a Brayshaw, that are close enough. And I think in the back line, the forward line, and even the midfield to this year, you can get away with it. The line that I'm seeing people now start to realize they've got real issues with and real decisions to make. This is where I think you can get really creative with Rao and potentially remove this headache, is if you do not have Gawn, Grundy, or Goldstein, 2 of those 3, especially in the SuperCoach format,
you're in trouble.
It is getting really, really tricky, because we spoke about Mark Pitnet, and we spoke about the really aggressive move of restructuring, and people even bringing down a Brodie Grundy to a Mark Pitnet, to take a Connor Buderick. I think Jai Simpkin was the name that was all on the nose, and he has been very good since. Yeah. But now the issue is Pitnet's scores have come back to the pack a little bit. Correct. He's got a break even of 76 in SuperCoach, MJ. So he's scored a 4 and an 83. So you'd think he's got a little bit more to make. But
Yeah.
even if we say he scores 100, he's around the 445 mark, we're talking 300K
Yeah.
to get Mark Pitnet to a max Gawn. And that's the guy that most of these coaches do not have.
Yeah.
And he's been on absolute fire. So I can see a lot of coaches thinking, you know what might be the best move? I know Pitnet might have a little bit of cash, but like we mentioned, so does Max Gawn the way he's going. So even if Pitnet goes up, Max Gawn seems to be going up at a similar rate. I would not be surprised if coaches look and go, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take Matthew Rowell and Mark Pitnet. I'm going to drop Rowell down to a rookie.
Yep.
And again, with the amount of DPP we've got in these sides, you can pretty much take your pick. I know
your
Jake
Buderick,
Arthur's a really
your Brayshaw, your Rivers, whatever.
Bring in an Arts or someone like that you like as a rookie, whatever you have to do. Obviously, Arts is preferred for a lot of people because he's a lot cheaper. So you might need that cash for this deal. But this might be your chance to go, you know what? Pitnet's been great, especially if you got on him early.
Yeah.
And you got to take some of those 130 plus scores. But MJ, we're talking in the last couple of weeks, you're giving up anywhere between 60 to 80 points on a Max Gawn. Like that is how incredible he's scoring. So
yeah, it's crazy.
Even if you can drop a Rowell down to, like I mentioned, an Arts, you get in Max Gawn because you're gonna need those guys. Obviously, as I mentioned, Goldstein's been sensational as well. But maybe by doing that, you recoup those 80 points, and albeit you might not be having two solid premiums, but with some of the players we've got out, you might be able to loophole, an Arts and another player and just get the best score you can and neutralize a Gawn because he's the type of guy. We're talking about scoring in the mid 160s, MJ, for the past 3 weeks. And we've spoken about how well rucks go in this format. Like he's gone a 184, a 141, a 163.
And
the 93 was against Nick Natanui.
Yeah, he's got Gold Coast this week. And then the following week, he's got the Segler, maybe McAvoy combination. So you'd certainly bank on that good scoring run to continue too.
Yeah, I just feel like it's very hard to get that cash. Like 300K is no small figure. So I think if you're a coach, and this is where enjoyment does come into it, if you do not have Max Gawn and he is on a run like this, it can absolutely suck the fun straight out of the competition. So I see the opportunity for a lot of coaches.
Yeah.
It might be time to jump off the Pitnet train. And again, Witts is no slouch.
No.
He might not go a 150. But at the same
140.
time, his break even's 128. So we're talking about a minimal price movement anyway.
Yeah.
I feel like if you can just restructure, bring in a Gawn for a Pitnet, Rowell down to a rookie.
Yeah.
That gives you another avenue for cash. And as I mentioned, I feel like a lot of people have options for loopholing.
Yep.
You get 2 cracks of that rookie score. As I mentioned, the way things are going at the moment, Gawn's going anywhere between 140, 150. If you can loophole and get a 50 in return for a rookie, I don't know if you can find a Pitnet and another premium around Rowell's price that are going to deliver that similar 200 points. And we haven't even factored the captaincy option that Gawn is. So I feel like for a lot of coaches with Pitnet or another ruckman they're not entirely happy with, I wouldn't go to the stepping stone option. I know a guy like Tim English has been great.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, maybe in a couple of weeks, now you've got to find another 150K to get to a Gawn. And it's just, you're just burning trades, MJ. So if I'm a coach like that, maybe you just think, yep, now's the time. Rowell's done an incredible job. It's given me a lot of cash here to do whatever I want. I'd be really inclined just to go, you know what? I'm very confident Gawn's going to be in the top few. He was in the top few when the format wasn't super ruck friendly.
Yeah.
Now it's as ruck friendly as I've ever seen.
Yeah.
He's the type of guy that I would have immense confidence in continuing this run. Again, as opposed to a Lockie Neal, who is susceptible to a tag, albeit no one's gone near him yet. There is Matt DeBoer in 2 weeks.
2.
But I just feel like this is a great opportunity for coaches because most people have Rowell, and especially most Pitnet owners would have him as well.
Yep.
I don't mind the pivot with all the DPPs you've got.
Yeah, I like it.
To bring a guy like that on and just neutralize that guy like Max Gawn. Because at the moment, he is taking the competition away from those coaches with this run.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and that's while that was very much a SuperCoach focused, stats and points and things. I think it's absolutely relevant for coaches across all formats. And you bring up this interesting point. I purely want to just drill on the AFL fantasy component of it, because here at the coaches panel, we love talking about all parts of fantasy footy. You bring up Lachie Neale. I've got this idea, and I don't know if going into a second lot of isolation has started to play with my brain. So I want to bounce this thought off you and pick your brain, Kane. Lachie Neale right now is $930,000 in AFL fantasy. Coming up against Geelong, so Thursday night, which is, time of recording tonight. So he's going to be in AFL fantasy, a vice captaincy loophole option. Got a break even of 37. Cam Guthrie, you suspect, would try and play some kind of negating role on him, given Geelong have shown they're happy to do a tag. And then next week, you talk about Matt de Boer. Here's my crazy thought. I want to bounce it off you. He's probably going to go up. Let's go off his projected score of 86. Another 40-odd K. Near $1 million. Next week, he's got Matt de Boer. Could you look at moving him on to pretty much anybody in the midfield you'd like? You're pretty much going to get 100K to a Treloar and their gaff, maybe about 150K to a Steele or to a Lions. It's similar for a Duncan. Could you downgrade away from the number one point scoring player right now to get hopefully someone that'll be within a comparable range? But as you've said, it's what you do with that extra trade that will make the difference, and get that 150K, 200K, 100K, whatever it is you look at, to put on top of a player and all of a sudden turn your Curtis Taylor next week into that bottomed out Bailey Smith if you don't have him, or to turn him into a Jack Crisp who's at a bottomed out price or something like that. Is that a type of move we should be considering AFL fantasy? Or if you're a Neale owner, one of the 38, 40% that have him, just go, I'm not moving him on for anything bar injury?
Well, MJ, it's a really interesting one. I wouldn't be doing it this week. Like you said, you've got a vice captaincy loophole, and there's really not many other players in this game that many coaches would have as an option. So if you even get a look at a Lachie Neale score again, it's probably McCluggage, Lions, Dangerfield, and then maybe Selwood owners might just have to throw it on there just because they can. Yeah, just because they can. The interesting part is cash generation is slow and gradual in AFL fantasy. It's a competition where it doesn't move too much. I think the interesting part is, what are the rookies like coming through? How much confidence do you have in downgrading those guys? Because if you don't have any confidence in the rookies, I am more inclined to do a move like that. Because especially if you look at a Lachie Whitfield type, Lachie Neale is at the moment 260K more than Lachie Whitfield. Clearly, the de Boer tag is the factor.
Yeah.
Because we know what he did to him in the finals. Lachie Neale destroyed GWS in the season when de Boer was out.
Yeah.
In the finals, he absolutely towed him up. And the addition to that also is, it's not just Matt de Boer why he's so effective. The GWS midfield is so good that they also deprive a player like Lachie Neale of the ball. That's why it's such a deadly combination, because you've got de Boer's a great tagger.
Yeah.
They've got a great midfield. And we saw what they did to Hawthorn. They are very happy at possessing the ball, and they have a lot of skillful players that can use it. So all of a sudden, if you have any Hawthorn players on the weekend, you notice it so much. There's just passages of play where 2 to 3 minutes go by, and you haven't even had a chance for a Hawthorn player to score. No. So it's a full collective unit that makes Matt de Boer and the Giants so hard to score against. Again, the hard thing, MJ, is what are you doing with the cash? That's what we always say, but what are you doing with the cash? Because you've got to look at it like we say, what's the combination? If you're getting, for instance, a Connor Budarick, who let's just say is a 40 in this format, which is still a decent score. And let's just say you think Lachie Neale against de Boer is, maybe an 80. That's still a ton to be a good effort. We're talking 120 points. Can you find, a Whitfield's a great example because he's so much cheaper with that incredible ceiling. Let's just say you do that next week, 250K, and all of a sudden you're making Budarick, 570. Maybe you've got a bit of cash in bank, and you found someone around 600K value that you just think, this person's on the up and up. Brandon Parfitt was an example. in previous weeks. The risk is it the one little road bump for a Lachie Neale? Is he going to he might cop that De Boer week, but then after that, he just continues on his merry way.
Yeah.
And the hard thing is he's playing so much time on ground, MJ. We're talking 98%. So it's not like he's off the ground and it's just an incredible points per minute sort of effort. He's doing stuff that, his minutes are only about 10 minutes less than last year, despite the game time collectively, going down 16 minutes. And as I said, if you've watched Lachie Neale play, he goes off when it's usually the ball's in slow play. Like it's almost like when he goes off the ground, the Lions are very happy to slow it down, give him a rest. Like he doesn't miss centre bounces. Like even if he goes off, his knack is that if a goal is kicked, he comes back on for the centre bounce. Yeah. So his scoring opportunities are barely affected. And the thing I've been super impressed by Lachie Neale is he spoke about, and he was challenged by his coach to kick more. Like you're a good kick, use the ball more. And just by getting his handball to kick ratio balanced back out, he's finding 5 to 6 more points alone. And we know in this condensed format how damaging just even 5 to 6 more points is. So I would have to love MJ, the combination. Like I would really have to be super confident because I've been just blown away by what Lachie Neale's done. Like I pegged him in our Keeper League podcast chats, as 100 sort of guy because that's what I'd seen from him. Yeah. And again, he hasn't got the attention yet, which is what we were critical of anyway, because we know he started red hot last year. He got some attention. He tailed off and he capped it off with a massive score against Richmond, who let him do whatever he wanted. He had 50 plus touches. So I still want to see the attention, but he's added strings to his bow. I can't not be impressed. Again, he's kicking more. He's actually hitting the scoreboard more. We all know what happened if he kicked straight the previous week. So I'm genuinely inclined to believe that even if the ball gets hold of him and drops him down to a 60 or 70 in this format, once he gets past that and the way he's playing and the way the Lions are playing and the teammates around him, he is the type of guy that can have, a 120 in the old type of season. So I guess my answer is, if you love the other players that you can get and you have supreme confidence that, these guys are about to skyrocket. Let's just say you have enough cash and it's a Whitfield and a Yo, and you think, Whitfield's going, 90 from here on in, Yo's going 85. And you think that, Lachie Neale gets a 70 and then maybe he goes back to his hundreds and you're replacing a Buderick. I think by all means, you definitely could make it work. Because like I said, cash is hard. The other factor is you have to put up with in that move, and this is the hardest part for coaches, is you are going to have to watch Lachie Neale play footy.
And you don't have
for
him.
And you don't have him for a very, very long time. So again, the longer the season goes, and once you're doing an upgrade quicker, that's the advantage. Like in the short term, you should get between 20 to 40 points on that move because Neale's top value, Buderick's sort of peaking, and the two players you're bringing in are going to probably be underpriced.
Sure.
The hard thing is you've done the upgrade, let's just say 3 weeks ahead of maybe you're scheduled to do if you just waited around for the rookies to generate cash.
Yeah.
The hard thing is in 3 weeks' time when that Connor Buderick gets brought up to another premium, now it's Lachie Neale and that premium chasing down a Whitfield and a Yo. So you've got to make sure that maybe 100 points you steal doesn't get overrun in the remaining 6 or 7 rounds with a Lachie Neale chasing it. And that's why those moves are so risky because the players you have to pick, you have to nail them. They have to be, they have to become, if you're bringing in a forward, they've got to almost be in the top 3-4 forwards, or conversely, Lachie Neale has to fall off a cliff. And the way he's playing, like as I said, like he's really impressed me. Again, time on ground's gone through the roof. He was challenged in that at Freo. He was an 80% sort of guy, went up to the low 90s at Brisbane last year. And again, albeit shortened format, he's playing, Harris Andrews type of time on ground type of numbers, MJ. Yeah. So there's massive risk in it. And that's what I think is unappealing because the people that have Neale probably have a good team and probably want to be more defensive in their rank.
Correct. I think that you've summarised that really, really well. If you are looking at guys that we've talked a little bit about Yo and a Whitfield really being at a good price range to pick up this week across the formats right now. Dangerfield's another one who's still in SuperCoach. If you believe he can bounce back, he got a 140 just the other week. He's just over $550,000 in Dream Team. I'm going to break even of 80, by the way. In Dream Team, break even of 83, just over 700K. In AFL Fantasy, a break even of 49. He's going to set you back about 720K. Again, he's this week, he could be a vice captaincy loophole option for you if you wanted to get a second hit at the captaincy cherry in that format and don't own a Lockie Neal. Other players that are right for the picking in varying formats. In Dream Team, for example, Jake Lloyd's got a break even of 96. But at 746, even if he doesn't get that, he's barely dropping anything. So he's pretty much ripe for the picking. Rory Laird's coming off the back of an 80-odd score. He's got a break-even of 77. He's under 650K, dropped about 50,000 on his initial starting point. And Matt Crouch got dropped just a couple of weeks ago, but has a break-even now of 78. These are all for Dream Team. And it's going to set you back just over $685,000. So again, if you're looking for some cheaper options across the formats, even in SuperCoach, if you want to go real crazy, Jack Rewalt's just over 250K and has a break even of 34. And we know that he can go on hot tears as well. No Lynch might mean he's more of a goal kicking focal point for him again. So there's these guys this week to go and get. And then if we try to look forward over the next 2 weeks, again, at coachespanel.tv, I've tried to help you in Dream Team and in SuperCoach, looking at some guys that are probably going to be at bottomed out price. I haven't done any AFL fantasy ones, just purely because I think pretty much everyone's got an achievable break even almost every single week in that format. But in 2 weeks' time, Patrick Cripps will be around about 574K because he's got a break even this week of 148. Clayton Oliver's pretty much about right now what he's going to be, but almost 475,000 for Cornelio in a week. Dusty will be under 500K in a week. And then in, similar to for those names across Dream Team, really though, let's look at the guys that are in 2 weeks' time that are the right for the picking options for us. In 2 weeks' time, we've already talked about Bailey Smith. He's going to be under 400,000. Should he hit his projected scores, he's got a break even this week of 171. I actually don't mind Ben Cunnington. He's got a break even over 200,000. He'll be under 500K. Again, we know what he can do in that format of the game. James Sicily and Shannon Hearn will both be around that 470,000 marker in a fortnight's time. Even an Isaac Heaney's got another 30, 40K to drop on what he's currently priced at. And then if you look through Dream Team, around about the 460K marker for Bailey Smith in that format. Andrew Gaff could be under 800,000 or there and thereabouts in 2 weeks' time. Dane Zorko, yes, he's playing a lot of forward, but an injury to a Neal could see, or an injury to a McCluggage type. And we never hope for injuries, but in 2 weeks' time, he'll be around 600,000 in Dream Team. As will be a Darcy Byrne-Jones. He'll be under $550,000. He started the year well, a little bit quiet the past couple of weeks in Port Adelaide. So that's one of those things that separates good coaches from great coaches, isn't it? It's not just thinking, Kane, this week I'm going to make this move, and then next week I'll think about what I'm doing. It's forecasting as best you can what your side will look like in 3 weeks' time or 4 weeks' time, because those are the moves that are going to set your team up for success and ultimately also inform what you should be doing this week.
Yeah, I think there's another few topics, MJ, I think are really, really fascinating this week. And one does revolve around Jake Arts. He was great on debut for the Tigers, mature age. And we know historically how much more consistent mature age players often are.
Yeah.
Richmond have been handed an incredibly unfortunate run of injuries. Again, that was absolute carnage at the MCG. And obviously the decision of, Basher Hooley, Shane Edwards with newborns on the way or just arrived to stay out of the hubs.
Asprey was out before.
Correct. So there seems to be opportunity aplenty. And I think a lot of people are thinking with the way Jake Arts played, he's got a good run at it. He's got a good run for the next, you have to say at least the next month, the way he played and the way these injuries are long-term or at least medium-term for these type of guys. But the thing I want to caution people with is I don't think Jake Arts is a must-have rookie in terms of if I have the cash to turn a Rao and a genuine rookie, I'm talking Starcevic, Brander,
Buderick.
Brown, Buderick. You know the type of player I'm talking about. If I have the availability in cash and I can get 2 players that I am very, very comfortable with in my team, I'm pulling the trigger on that. I'm not going to just downgrade one of those guys to an arts and have 250K sitting in the bank for a future week. Because like I mentioned last week, MJ, stuff keeps popping up.
Yeah.
Like I've seen people talking about, and this is another topic I really want to dive into because I just don't get the logic on this. But I've seen people say, I'm going to hold Matt Rao because he's not going to lose cash.
Right.
And I'm going to trade Jack Viney because he will drop in cash. MJ, it's happening out there. And I want to caution people and say, get your points on the field.
Yeah.
Jake Arts is not a good enough rookie to move your chains around. If I thought he was an 80-plus guy, I understand it because the drop-off between the premium I'm going to bring in and what I expect Arts to score is not that much. So, yes, I want to get on him before. The other factor that's coming through is there's heaps of rookies coming through. They're talking about playing 5 rounds of games in 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And we've already seen a guy like Marlon Piggott, he's already back in the fray.
Yeah.
Melbourne's language has changed incredibly about Harley Bennell. He was apparently miles away after the Essendon Melbourne game was postponed.
Yeah.
The language Simon Goodwin was using sounded like he was a month away.
Yeah.
Now they've had a horrible game against Richmond where they couldn't use the ball by foot at all, and that's just collectively across the whole group. And now people are singing Harley Bennell's praises internally, and he's back in the mix. So my point is, there's always going to be rookies on the way.
Yeah.
Already this week, we've got Will Kelly from Collingwood.
Sam Simpson.
We've got the 2
Geelong.
Sydney boys. Sam Simpson's back after multiple years biding his time. We've got Dylan Stevens. We've got Warner. There will be rookies because squads are going to be pushed more than ever. That's not just because of the frequency of games, but that's also the level of injuries we've seen in the last few weeks.
It's been huge.
Again, people thought it would happen after a long layoff, and unfortunately it is happening. So I want to caution people and say, if you can turn a Rao and a rookie into 2 players that you are very happy with, have no concerns about letting Arts go by. Yes, he may come out and prove me wrong and score 100 and be in the team and I've missed him. But if I've got a chance to turn 2 rookies that I picked at the start of the year, I know Rao's been sensational.
Yeah.
I know Starcevic probably has, depending on how he goes, anywhere between 50 to 100K left. But the game is points. And if I can get points on the field with 2 premiums, I'm going to do that trade. On to the Jack Viney thing, MJ. And there's a few other people I'm going to throw. These are the other names I've heard. John Segler, Devon Smith, Jack Viney. They're the main 3 I've heard where people go, oh, they've had a couple poor weeks. They're not going to be good enough keepers. This is my thoughts on Jack Viney, MJ. And most of the competition brought him in after his monster score. They brought him in after his monster score, especially in SuperCoach where we were gifted 5 trades. Jack Viney on the weekend could not have kicked the ball worse. Again,
I've seen Oz kickers kick it better, unfortunately.
He had 8 turnovers, MJ. He had 8 turnovers. Like, we talk about disposal efficiency. You can't just look at what the disposal efficiency is. You need to see if they're clangers.
Yes.
Is it okay? Is it costing you 0 points and gaining you 0 points with an ineffective kick? Or is it costing you points the other way when he kicks it straight to the opposition? And unfortunately for Viney, his disposal was poor.
Yep.
He had 1 touch in the 4th quarter when the game was still there to be won by Melbourne.
Yep.
And he scored 60 points. He barely went up at all in the 4th quarter.
In SuperCoach, yeah.
So now he's lost 30K from what he was the week previous. He scored an 86 and a 91 before that. Solid numbers. I just find it very hard to believe that Jack Viney is pressing enough in anyone's team. Yes, he could drop more cash, and I would say with a break even that he has of 136, he will definitely lose cash this week.
Yep.
But this is where I sit with him. If you are trading Jack Viney and you're happy to leave a Buderick, a Brown, a Starcevic, these type of guys on your field, Rivers, who could be in, we haven't seen teams yet at time of recording, MJ, but he could be an issue, especially at his age and Melbourne's inconsistency.
Yep.
Brander's not in the team. Noble's not in the team at this stage. Jack Viney had a 60. He had a 60, and as I mentioned, his disposal was awful.
Couldn't
It was
have been
absolutely
worse,
awful. Melbourne lost, and he wasn't helping them in any type of way. Marcus Bontempelli was in the 50s this week, MJ.
Yeah.
And we go, oh well, he had a bad game. It's Marcus Bontempelli. If Jack Viney keeps scoring poorly, and I mean, let's just say sub 70,
Sure.
he's going to drop so much cash that it's not even worth trading.
Nah.
That's one option, right? So he keeps going at 60s. He's 350K. There's no point even trading him at that point.
Yeah.
If he keeps scoring well and he starts generating cash again, let's just say he goes at 100 for the next month on average, and he's back around 500K. Well, guess what? You're not going to trade him that way either because he's scoring well enough to be in your team.
Yeah.
So I don't know if the number's exactly 80 points. Maybe that's the number where you go, okay, he's plateauing around 450K, 400K. He's scoring 80. I'll move him on because it's pretty constant. I can take my pick of the premiums. Have we not seen the amount of injuries we've been through the last few weeks? You're gonna tell me you're gonna sit Raul on the bench.
Yes.
You're gonna trade Viney because Viney's gonna lose cash. So MJ, let's fast forward to next week at the rate we're going. Let's just say, for sake of argument, we do lose a Lockie Neal.
Sure.
We lose a Lockie Neal, and it's just, let's say it's a 1 week hammy, the Nat 5 hammy, I'll call it. So now we've got Matt Rowell and Lockie Neal on our bench. Okay, so now we're sitting on these two guys. We could have traded Rowell last week. We could have traded him. But no, we traded Viney. We traded Segler. We traded Devon Smith. I just feel like people have lost the plot, worrying about 30K drop.
Yeah.
Again, Viney was awful.
Sure.
Again, if awful is 60 points, and as I said, 8 turnovers, nothing when the game was still there to be won.
Mm.
The guys before this has gone 186, 86, 91.
Yeah, it's 100-point difference.
He's scoring okay. Again, even if he just goes at the 86 and the 91 and we forget that incredible performance round 1, is that really this much of a problem at this point in the season?
Yeah.
As I mentioned, it goes pretty much one of two ways. He keeps scoring poorly and he depreciates so quickly
that it's not
worth it because it's not worth trading. And he just sits there and ideally he slides to an M9.
Sure.
Conversely, if he bounces back, well, guess what? He's probably okay at M8.
Yeah.
That's again, as I said, maybe the number's 80 points and he just ticks at 80 points and it's a bit annoying, but it's not the end of the world. It's better than having a rookie on the field. If you trade Viney and you leave Rowell there, you are conceding another rookie on the field.
Correct.
You are conceding that.
Well, it's pushing the
30K,
McInerney on, for example. Yeah. Exactly.
So you might be pushing on a McInerney or a Tyler Brown. So you're telling me you're going to cop probably a 20 to a 30-point score instead of maybe, let's say, what Viney gets.
In a bad
Let's say it's a 30-point difference. Let's say it's a 30 to 40-point difference, MJ.
And that's a bad week. Yeah.
I would take 40 points for 30K. If there was a system where you could buy points and lose the salary cap you have,
yeah,
I would do that. So I just want to caution people that, yes, Viney hasn't been a great pick. I think everyone who brought him in is disappointed. If you brought him in after that, you're not happy.
No,
especially when you look back in hindsight and you see that, Jai Simpkin was sitting there in the forward line at 60K cheaper.
Yeah.
And he's been unbelievable. But it's gone. Like, the movement for Viney is gone. He's going at 79 in his last 3.
Mm.
Is that really the end of the world in a season where we've been getting injuries left, right, and centre?
No.
I just really want to caution people who are saying, I'll hold Rowell because he won't depreciate in value and I'll trade a Jack Viney. I just do not get your logic. Unless you know that Tyler Brown's going 85, 90 plus this week.
Yeah.
Let me know. I'll put him on the field. But
please.
In the long run, even if that trade worked out and you get a Tyler Brown 90, the next week, you've still got to worry about Rowell. So if anything else goes wrong, Jeremy Howe, Nat 5, you've got this guy that is out long term. There's no hope that he gets a 1 week 5 hammy in his back. They've said he's out for 12 weeks.
Yeah.
Which in my mind means the season.
Yeah.
So I just want to caution people. I know you might be worried about little drops in cash. But as I said, if Viney goes 100 in 2 or 3 weeks' time, he's back to the price you had anyway. So
exactly.
I don't get that part. I know that people are frustrated with Segler. Again, he split time with McAvoy on the weekend, which is raising all sorts of alarm bells. But I have to believe if you watch the game, and if you've heard any of the media out of this game, the Giants were as efficient inside 50 to scores as we've ever measured in the competition.
They were phenomenal on the weekend, weren't they?
And unfortunately for Ben McAvoy, the summary of the night is when Jeremy Cameron wheeled on his left, kicked it into the pocket, Harry Himmelberg put a step on McAvoy,
just exposed,
spun him around and ran into an open goal. They lost Mitch Lewis. They lost Scrimshaw.
Yeah.
But what do you think Clarko's going to do? Of course he's going to swing Segler and McAvoy forward and share in the ruck. He just lost his key forward.
Yeah, that's right.
And again, as I mentioned, the backline was not working. They couldn't have let more scores through more quickly. Again, every time Giants went in there, they were scoring. It was not working. Again, that goes for Sicily as well.
Yeah.
You cannot panic on Sicily.
No way.
In SuperCoach, he scored 44. Awful. And I know people traded him in, so there's a lot of venom about that.
Yeah,
at the
of
moment.
course there is.
He's averaging 90.
Yeah.
Again, the GWS forward line was as good
It could
as
not
you
have
will ever see.
could not have been more efficient entering inside 50.
Exactly.
And converting on the scoreboard.
There was no, there was barely any behinds for Sicily to take. There was barely any intercept marks. It wasn't happening. If it was going in, it was ending in a score.
That's right.
And we haven't even factored in the injuries. So again, maybe this is the start where Clarko shifts McAvoy back into the ruck.
Sure.
But I don't think it is. I really don't think it is. And I know Segler has Grundy and Matt and Gawn coming up.
Yep.
He's going 86 as a ruck forward.
Yep.
It's a bloody handy flexibility, MJ, if you've got a Gawn or a Grundy to swing him into the R3 position and cover them for a week.
Yep.
I just think, again, these are guys that they're in their best 22.
Yep.
I'm not worried about Segler dropping out of the team.
No.
It was an in-game transition. It didn't happen at the start of the game. It wasn't
And with
part
a
of the
reason.
plan.
Yeah. And with reason.
Exactly. It wasn't part of the plan. It was when the injuries happened to Scrimshaw and Lewis. As I mentioned, it forced a change. You had to adjust. Clarko adjusted the side. McAvoy went into the ruck. Segler forward. They switched it up. And clearly, Hawks didn't win. Segler didn't score great. McAvoy did. But he spent the whole preseason there in this setup.
Yeah.
I'd be very shocked. I think Jonathan Patton will come back in.
Yep.
The structure will be fixed.
Yep.
Clearly, the way the ball was coming in from the midfield, he wouldn't be happy with.
No.
And the way the defense worked together wasn't great either because GWS had a field day. So I just feel like, MJ, when people are worrying about guys in this 450 to 500K range who are solid sort of scorers, obviously Devon Smith's a bit on the cheaper end, but he's actually averaging more than Segler. Like, we're worried about 50 to 70 point games for guys that are averaging 86, 87, and Viney's going at 105. As I mentioned, even if we take out the first one, it's still 79.
Yeah.
Like, we're copying 29s, 28s, 38s. Like, can we get these guys off the field?
That is the priority.
My other question is, who are you trading them to?
Yeah.
You've either robbed a bank and you're going a Segler to a Simpkin, 100K.
Yeah.
Like, and then what does that do?
Yeah.
Like, you're actually not moving closer to a 22 of premium, consistent scoring players. Again, people were off Dan Houston. Interesting enough, Ryan Burton goes down. Houston swung more back into defense. Fern Jones tails off. Houston goes up.
Yeah.
Like, when you're in this price bracket, you've just got to be patient with these guys. Again, the amount of stories I'm hearing about people jumping off Hugh McCluggage after 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And now he's the third most informed player in SuperCoach the last 3 weeks.
Gone for a reason.
I feel for you, but you let him have 2 games. Like, 2 games. Like, one of them, and then there was an 8-week break and then one more. So get the rookies off the field. If you don't have enough cash to do a Rao and a rookie to two premiums, that's where I think a Jake Arts does come into it.
Sure.
Because you can't get someone that you're happy with. Have that cash next week. Let them appreciate a little more and get someone you are happy with. But you cannot, in my opinion, unless I don't even know what other injury you'd have to have. Matt Rowley's out for the season. I just think get that money, reinvest it into your team.
Yeah. He's made 250 plus K for you. Yeah.
Don't worry about Segler, Viney at this stage.
No.
As I mentioned, it's going to go the 2 ways either way. They're either going to keep scoring well enough that you want to keep them.
Correct.
Or they're going to drop off enough where you think
it's not
worth the trade. Just let it go. It's okay. Again, we're talking about 70s, 53 and 60, MJ. That's still 20-odd points more than a rookie.
Correct.
And they were awful.
And that's their bad game.
I just wanted to dispel that that logic I'd seen with people saying that they're worried about a 30K depreciation of a Viney.
It's not worth it.
And they're going to hold it. And it's just, you're just digging yourself a hole the next week where if we get another injury, which at the rate we're going is going to happen.
Of course it will.
And now all of a sudden you've got another player that's injured on your team.
What if you
got
get
400K sitting on the
week
bench
before? Yeah, exactly.
Well, it happened, MJ, and it keeps happening. So, again, let's see what happens with teams. We already know we've already got 3 debutants announced early in the week. Announced. We haven't even got to a possible Isaac Rankin. So, again, if it suits your plans this week to drop a rookie to a Jake Arts and upgrade Matt Rao, beautiful. If you've already got the cash to take a rookie to another premium, absolutely do it. Absolutely do it. And I feel like there will be rookies in the future. Don't restructure your trades and have, I've heard of people having up to 300K in the bank. Reinvest it back into your team. I've seen people talking about, I'll get, Stephen Hill was an example we spoke about last week, MJ, and he did it again. First quarter we're talking 60 to 70% of his score for the game came in the first quarter. And then he tailed off and people have paid 190K. Just to pluck a name, but Will Hamill scored a 50 for 70K less.
Yeah.
Like, you've got to really view it as the collective, fight for all that cash you can, sure. But when you get an opportunity to get rookies to premiums, take it. Don't worry that Starcevic has 50K more. Hey, if you want to wait for Starcevic, Jordan Ridley's only getting further away. Lockie Whitfield's only getting further away.
That's it.
So the game is points. Get the rookies off the field, get premiums in. As I keep saying, if you can do it this week, if you can take a route, and the reason I use Starcevic so much is that he's 60 to 100K more than the other rookies.
Yeah.
So he gets you there easier.
Yeah, correct.
Just do it.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're not going to do a Curtis Taylor. He just scored 100. He's got obvious cash to make.
Totally.
Starcevic in SuperCoach, just to stick with that format, he's got a 70 break even.
Yeah.
Yes, you could wait a month and get some more cash possibly.
But he's pretty much done his job.
He's done his job, MJ. His job is to become a premium.
Yep.
Like, that is his job. That is Rao's job. Rao's done it so well that we thought we'd have him for the year.
Yep.
But if you look at it in isolation and you're turning Rao and Starcevic into 2 premiums this week, you are moving closer to that completed team.
Yeah, it's true.
If you get to round 12, everything's great. You've got cash everywhere. You can have the luxury of maybe a Viney up then. Great. You've got the rookies off the field. And the other reason I always caution people of trading these premium players I mentioned is they have natural job security. They're in the team. They're often better players. Viney, Segler, Devin Smith, barring injury, they're not leaving the team.
No.
We might think a Rivers has great job security this week. A Melbourne loss, all of a sudden there's some doubt.
Yeah.
A Brander copped a knock. A Pickett you wouldn't think would be dropped. So that's another reason where I just think hold these mid-range guys. At least they are playing.
Yeah.
Will the price fluctuate? Absolutely. Sure. Absolutely will. But at the same time, if you wait long enough, it usually corrects itself to a normal level. So I've seen a lot of chat about that, MJ, and I just wanted to coach our Coaches Panel listeners that it's a very flawed logic to be stressing about 30K and sacrificing obvious points.
Yeah.
And I just get the points back in there. And as I said, like you mentioned, MJ, let your trades this week help your future trades.
Yeah.
Keeping a row is putting off a problem that, as you said, next week, who knows what we've got? We might have 2 more injuries. And now you've got more cash sitting on the bench because you downgraded a Tyler Brown to a Arts.
Yep.
Like, I don't
and you
know
never
what
get to use that cash then. It doesn't. I think once you've got a known issue, you've got to move on that. And yes, it might change your plans and your structures. But again, as we're seeing in a pure AFL sense, the teams that are adjusting the best to hub life, to shorten quarters, are the ones that are winning. The coaches that are going to have success this year across all of the formats. Yes, you can have your plans. Okay, in 3 weeks' time, or 2 weeks' time, I'm going to get Bailey Smith, and it's going to be under 400K. You might not be able to get him because something will happen, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Plan for the best, but then you've got to be so adjustable along the way. And you're right. We're looking at all these options and candidates through there. One thing that's going to really go unheralded this year is players with dual position, and having that dual position link through your midfield is going to be so critical to success this year. Having that mid forward, having that defender mid available for you, and picking up these guys that are just going to be able to save you a potential trade for a week, not just so that you're safe for that week, but it means that you can still potentially continue on with your plans that you want to do. So having that Rivers, he might not play this week, but keeping him for the year for you as your M11 could be the best thing for your team this year, because it's going to open up that gateway to ensure the Houston can be flicked back and forward through your side. And so it's looking at, how am I going to complete my side as quickly as I can? How am I going to maximize points on field as quickly as I can? And then the cash cows that I've got, how can I get them to move as quickly to that premium possible?
Yeah, MJ, you're spot on. Again, the game is points. We do that by obviously needing cash generation. I'm not questioning the importance of cash generation.
Correct.
But when an opportunity presents, and I'm going to say it again, to turn 2 rookies into 2 premium players, take it. As I said, there's not another Matt Rao. If Jake Arts was Matt Rao and he's scoring
Different
at
story.
a rate that's comparable to the premium I'm going to bring in, of course I'm going to take him. But I think there's just as much likelihood Jake Arts scores a 40 on the weekend.
Yeah.
And guess what? Now I've put a Sam Sturt on the bench to field Jake Arts. I've put a Trent Rivers, a McInerney. Like, it's not helping my scoring. So I just, again, I want people to pump the brakes on Segler, Devon Smith, Viney.
Yeah.
Pump the brakes. As I said, why are we all over Viney when Bontempelli was worse?
Yeah.
And people paid an absolute truckload for him.
Yeah.
Like, I know it hurts with Viney because you missed his monster score.
Yeah.
You missed his monster score, and that's okay. Again, if the worst thing that happens is he slides all the way at the end of the season to an M9, I don't think it's the end of the world.
I think that's actually a phenomenal M9. Remembering,
again, it's a good
it's
M9.
100-point turnaround in what he's done. So, yes, you missed the score. Yes, you missed the Simpkin. Take the emotion and the frustration out of your decisions. It's one of the most things that will cloud you from success, is that emotional reaction and frustration that dictate your turns. You know, to not go around the circle again with Viney. He's shown he can go 180 this year in SuperCoach. He's shown he can go, 130, 140 or something like that in AFL Fantasy DreamTeam into shortened quarters. Like, these are realms that nobody really has got to this year. And you have that player. Yes, you might have missed the score, but you have that player. And you're going to choose him over the Buderiks. Come on now. You're going to choose him as over a McInerney. Come on now. Think about it. Yes, it was bad this week. But what would be worse is him delivering you a ton this week and you've moved him on. You had the...
Well, MJ, especially if you've kept Rao, I don't even know if I can help someone who makes that type of call. Like, it's, as I said, you've got a proven issue. And as I said, not a 1 week issue. Like, this is, he's not coming back to your team. Like, no, it's something that honestly, it just frustrated me, the logic that was being preached. And I just think it was just wrong. I just didn't want our listeners, following that path. And as I said, if you're really confident in Jake Arts and you think he's a 75 guy every week, maybe more with the players out, like, go for it. Get that in now. Take that cash. You're not going to lose that much scoring if he goes 75 to the premium. You're probably going to bring it anyway, and you're on your way. But to say that Jack Viney is a priority to trade over Matt Rao because he's going to lose 30K. Again, this is the thing. He's lost 30K from last week.
He's already lost.
If you wait a month, he might be back over 500K. Like, it's all about timing, we know, with this game. So, as I said, don't lose sight of the priority, which is premium players on, rookies off.
Yeah. It's a pretty simple game when you say it like that, Kane. That is for sure. We might quickly head over to Twitter before we wrap up this episode, just to make sure we answer some of your questions. Brenton wants to know, for AFL Fantasy, has Whitfield bottomed out in price? Mate, the answer is well and truly yes. If you're not a Whitfield owner, in any format of the game, this is the week to get him, isn't it, Kane? Like 43 is the break even in that format. He's coming off the back of his first ton in that format of the game for the year. He even looked good the week before against Collingwood. So good that they had to tag him after quarter time. If you haven't had Whitfield at this point in the year, it's gone pretty well for you. But now we talk about priorities and what you should be doing. Man, you ran the gauntlet against Whitfield. It's gone your way. Don't tempt.
Yeah, I think the thing now, MJ, is like you said, if you haven't had him, you're actually banking in a win here. Like we talk about, you don't want to bank in a loss.
Yeah,
coaches with Whitfield have suffered. They've had to suffer that concussion-affected score.
Yeah,
and now they're hoping that, yep, old Whitfield's back, healthy, moving great, jumped it up beautifully against the Hawks. I think bank on that win. Don't overthink it. People were paying 150K more at the start of the season
to have him. Yeah,
don't worry about the nickel and diming of, but he's got a good team this week. Port Adelaide's a great team. He's got Brisbane the following week. Great teams, but also great player. Like, just take it, run, bank in the win. Bank in the win that those coaches that have had to suffer through Whitfield, they're really hoping to get rewarded. So lock it in. Great value.
Again, easiest
number one forward. I think just you can't overcomplicate those sort of moves, especially with the flexibility of mid forward, MJ. There's pretty much, you can move anyone in your team and you can bring him in either line, whatever suits.
Yeah, I think so too. One of our Patreons, Andrew, thank you, mate, for your support. If you want to join the Patreon army and support the Coaches Panel, you can do that too at coachespanel.tv. Plenty of exclusive content and access to the panel is available to you depending on what tier of involvement you get into. But Andrew wants to know an AFL fantasy question. Kane, who scores more for the rest of the year? I can afford them both. Merit or steal? Good question, Andrew. What do you think?
Rest of the year. Oof.
There's about 20K difference, just so you know, and ownership's not far off either, Kane.
To be honest, I'm actually a massive rap for Steele this year, which I know the proven nature of Merritt. The hard thing with Merritt is he's been out of the CBAs, which is interesting for his role. And I know he had a great game, against the Swans when he was, I think he only had one CBA or none at all, and he still scored terrific, as is his game. But what Jack Steele's doing, like the pressure he's putting on and the role that he plays. And again, I know people call it tagging what he did against Cripps.
It's not
but that is the way he plays. Like his tagging is when it goes to a stoppage, I'm going to stand next to you. And I'm going to try to win the ball. And if you win the ball, I'm going to tackle you. So honestly, MJ, this year, I actually have a lot of faith in Jack Steele becoming that player. And I just feel like if Merritt is on the outside, like the evidence I've got so far suggests, and I know Stringer's out, so that is a caveat that if, we look at the CBAs next week and all of a sudden Zach's in there with Shield and McGrath. But it just feels like to me that they want to give Parrish spurts. They want to give Deb Smith. They actually really like Langford's size in there.
Yeah.
And then obviously they've lost the burst of Stringer, but playing that outside role this year, the way scoring's going, doesn't seem to be suiting those type of guys. So I'd actually be inclined to go with Steele.
And knowing also that in not just this week, they're coming up against Fremantle, but the week after that, they've got Adelaide, who are just gifting hundreds.
Good little run, MJ, isn't it?
It's a nice little run. And again, you contrast that to Merritt, not just in terms of what he's been able to do and things like that. They come up against North this week. Not horrible in terms of a matchup for them through there. The week after that, it's the Western Bulldogs. So certainly if you were just looking at a 2-week play out for you, Andrew, Steele's looking the goods. And you bring up that great point, and we'll probably wrap up the episode here. When it does come to AFL Fantasy and Dream Team with these shortened quarters, it's the guys that are, so dimensional in more than just one facet that are scoring well for us through the midfield. Even Treloar came back in and showed it for us, even at that premium price. He looks like, yes, it's one game of data. Guys that impact the game with tackles, that stoppages, that get on the inside and the outside of the game, that find space, that can impact the scoreboard. These players that aren't just a one-dimensional contested ball and that's it, or an outside player and that's it. Guys that have multiple strings to their bow, which you talked about Lachie Neale right at the top of this episode having. These are the guys in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team I want in my midfield. Yep, it's great to have the outside guy that can junk it up. The gaff's probably the exception to the rule, but I'd want the guy that I know that can get 5 or 6 tackles a game, even in a bad score, that's going to pick up 20-odd possessions a game, even in a bad game through there. So, yeah, I think that's where I'd be looking at too.
Yeah, I agree, MJ. It's just one of those factors that it's just a slightly different role for Zach. We just haven't seen how this is going to play out. And obviously with Zach, he's missed a game and the Bombers have missed a game. So sample size wise, it's only 3 scores. And when you've got a 75, a 108 and a 58,
it's a lot.
Like it's hard to actually, comprehend what that mix is like. And we've talked about when Jack Steele's freed up and Brett Ratton said freed up. And as I said, he's still very accountable. He's not going to he's not isolated on the player. Like he still tries to win the ball. And you could see it on what he did on Thursday night against Cripps. Like Cripps barely touched the ball in the first quarter and Jack Steele was everywhere. And I think having the skill players around him, he's a great size, Jack Steele, that he's actually starting to work out that he can take a mark around the grounds. He can spread. And I just love that you can always bank on the tackles with Jack Steele.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Jack Steele. For what it's worth, mate, Andrew, I'm bringing him in this week too. So if he goes pear-shaped, we can be in it together. That's how it can kind of work. Hey, Kane, appreciate your work on this episode, mate.
No worries, MJ. Thank you.
Of course, if you want to go check out some of the articles that are up online, they are there for you at coachespanel.tv. The links for our Patreon army, well, that is there for you if you'd love to get involved and support the Coaches Panel. And then, of course, you can keep in touch with us over Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Good luck this week. I hope everything goes your way. But from us here at the Coaches Panel, we'll chat to you next week.